There's a tendency to think that things are always going to be the way they are. There were many moments where I really questioned, am I like following my dreams or am I wasting my time? Sometimes you just got to stay in the game and don't expect to have all the answers every damn day.
Interview prep, baby.
Pass the torch, man. Keeps getting better. Welcome to the podcast, Lee Wybranksi. Super interesting background and story, so I'm excited to get to chat with you today. You're definitely one of the first people in your field, being an artist, that I've ever spoke to, so a lot of questions. But how you doing? Thanks for joining the show.
Oh, great to be here, Danny. I'm excited. Looking forward to it. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. The weather is turning and golf season is fully here, so I'm excited about that.
Where are you?
Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh.
Boston. Yeah.
Well, I had a very nice stay in Boston last June at Brookline.
Yes, I know. I didn't get to go to the tournament, but I saw the energy and the energy around the city was fantastic.
It was
Good
spectacular.
outcome. I wish our boy Will Zalatoris, which we were talking about a little bit before this, who was previously on the podcast, wish he pulled that one out, but got to give our hats off to Matt Fitzpatrick.
I mean, it's not like Will did anything. Practically perfect, right? But
Yeah.
it's hard to knock the storybook stuff of winning the amateur and then the U.S. Open at the same venue. That's pretty cool stuff.
Amazing. And I have a feeling Will will be back up near the top of the leaderboard shortly after his little back injuries healed. So, but now let's get into it. So I usually start this podcast asking about where people grew up. I want to give you the mic and give a chance to introduce yourself. So when someone asks you what you do for a living, I guess, how do you answer that?
It's been a hard question to answer through the years because it's like nothing anyone has ever heard of. But my best soundbite after all this time is that I'm an artist and a designer working mainly in golf.
I think that works well. And so an artist. So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the western suburbs of Philadelphia. I was born in Havertown, which is a stone's throw, a few drivers away from Marion, but on the other side of Westchester Pike, so to speak. And then we moved a little bit further out towards Westchester, Exton, when I was about 11. And then away to Syracuse University for college. And then back down to Pennsylvania, but moved into the center city proper in Philly in the early 90s. And my first studio was at 17th and Walnut off of Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia. And I was there for about 17 or 18 years before transplanting out west here. Wow.
And so when did kind of the world of art come into your life? Was it at a young age? Was it at school at Syracuse? Was it after you graduated college? But when did that come into your life?
I was the kid who was always drawing. There's always a few kids in every class, I feel like, that love to draw. And that was my thing. All my old notebooks and school books are covered in doodles on the margins. And, if I didn't have baseball practice or something after school, I'd just turn on the tube and draw for an hour or two, and I would just be content, So it was something that was just a pure sort of, I don't even want to say passion, more like a pastime. Just something And I guess when you're a kid, I got to be good at it. If you do anything enough, you get good at it. And then people tell you nice things. And I don't know, I was the kind of kid that enjoyed getting praise, I guess. So I was always drawing. And then, I had 12 years of Catholic parochial education outside of Philly there. And I got a great education for sure, but didn't really include any art training at all. In fact, I can remember if we were misbehaving in grade school, they would threaten to take away art class. And I used to get so mad. I'm like, how come you never threaten to take away math class? But I didn't have any artistic training until it came time for university. And I had heard at that point my whole life that I had this wonderful talent. And I was also brought up to believe that, talents are God-given and your job is to use them. So I figured I was gonna explore this, and I was gonna pursue art, and kind of took a hard left turn. I was, a relatively good student, clean cut kid, and then I went away to art school and came away with a mohawk and combat boots, and my parents nearly disowned me that first year, but that's how I got into art with both feet.
Very fascinating, very fascinating. And so was your first job and your first work out of school in art, or did you have a real world job where you were wearing a suit, sitting at a cubicle?
No, I mean, I'm very happy to say that I've never
Lucky
I've
man.
worn a suit, but I've never sat the cubicle.
Yeah.
I did start working as a professional artist right out of school in a sense. I kind of stumbled, how would you say? Boy, at that time in my life, I was not sort of vocationally driven, meaning I wasn't someone who knew what they wanted to be or were going to move right from A to B in the shortest possible way. I was much more sort of exploratory. I felt like, in a way, I kind of felt like I lived a bit of a sheltered life. I wanted to see the world. Anyway, I thought I'd sock away a few grand, buy a Eurail pass, and travel. But I stumbled into this opportunity doing house portraits, basically, pen and ink drawings of sort of, nice old estates on the main line outside of Philadelphia. Very traditional, but it was not something I'd ever done before, but I always felt, and it's still to this day sort of like a hired gun, meaning I could draw or paint almost anything. I mean, there's some things that are more enjoyable to draw or paint, but I'm happy to sort of just put my pencil to any subject. So doing those house portraits was how I got started as a commercial artist. In fact, I don't know if I've ever shared this in any public space before, but in the very beginning, I also did a few charcoal pet portraits. So there's a few limited edition pug portraits out there with my name on the bottom. But
we might need to grab a few of those. I got a pretty plain background here behind me right now. I'm in a new little space for the podcast, so we could throw some pug paintings up there.
Makes me nervous seeing empty walls like that, Danny. You got to
I know.
hang something up.
A serial killer vibe. So, but no, but I love it. So it's super fascinating, as I said. But so when did the game of golf come into your artistic world?
Yeah, right around that time. I'd been doing that sort of work for a couple of years. I moved into the city, and I was just sort of, finding my feet, finding my way, and it kind of woke up an entrepreneurial side of myself that I had no idea was there at all. Pretty soon, once I started putting my shoulder into it and caring about like trying to make it work, the travel plans fell away, and I just kind of became devoted to just trying to push this rock up the hill. And all along the way, I struggled and starved like all the stereotypes. But I was always receiving a lot of positive affirmation about the work. So, it turns out you can live on, I don't want to say praise, but enough people seemed to like the work that it made me feel like I wasn't a complete idiot for doing this, So I kept doing it and tried to find ways to grow it, grow the opportunity, grow the business. And then in short, what happened, I had a couple of partners at the time, and which is kind of funny because it was a meager business that couldn't support one person, but I had a couple other guys involved, and we basically decided to take my house drawings and show them to some of the finest golf clubs in the region that were famous for having beautiful clubhouses. So that's exactly what we did. We picked a bunch of clubs around the New York Met section that were, top 50 clubs. Winged Foot Golf Club happened to be my very first commission in golf. You probably know the clubhouse. It's a pretty famous clubhouse. And that opened a lot of doors. And within that first year, I've probably done 6 or 7 clubhouse portraits for great clubs around Philly, Jersey, and New York. I mean, Saucon Valley, Ridgewood, Winged Foot, National Golf Links. We dropped down to Caves Valley in Baltimore that first year, I remember. Anyways, so by the end of that first year, I was suddenly sort of a golf artist. And that's how I got my first that's how I got off the tee.
God, I like that. Got off the tee. And so rewinding a little bit here, because you mentioned you were just kind of trying to get by, but you just didn't have any big hopes and dreams. Like you said, you had a mohawk and some combat boots, but you
That
didn't
was
really
only for
have
that first
like it wasn't.
semester.
Yeah, okay. They were quickly removed. But
Yeah, yeah.
you didn't have any big hopes and dreams of you would be doing where you are right now, like creating art for some of the greatest golf clubs in the world and creating these brands and logos for golf clubs. But you kind of just started out, hey, I want to just follow my passion and just dive into some art.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little story that probably is the only thing that I can point to as one of those clarifying moments. I didn't feel like I did not have a clear vision of what I wanted to do exactly. But I remember orientation freshman year of art school. The dean comes out and, you know, makes his opening remarks, his welcome, etc. But through the course of this speech, he mentions that, you know, 2 years after you graduate, less than 20% of you are going to be working in the arts. And 3 years after you graduate, less than 10% of you. And I was just totally put out by that. I mean, which I've come to realize must have been his intention, was to separate the wheat from the chaff. And I wouldn't even say, it's not like I was suddenly a dedicated, disciplined art student even after that. But that's where I kind of made the decision that if I was going to choose this path, I was going to find a way to make it work out. You know, I was going to find a way to make a living making pictures. And I kind of decided that very early on. And I wasn't that picky about what pictures I made. Meaning simply, you know, I had colleagues at that time in my life who were great painters who already knew what they wanted to paint. They sort of had a, you know, they had a body of work in their mind that they could just get it out there. But, you know, I had the ability to imagine things, but I also have sort of a problem-solving mind. So I was happy to sort of apply my creativity to problem-solving and not just expressing my own inner demons or inner wishes or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that teacher was probably trying to motivate you a little bit, but it's like when you're a kid playing youth sports and they tell you that only 1% make it to pro athletics, right? And they kill your dream right away on the baseball field. It's like, hey, you're never going to play in the big leagues. But
Wow.
It was probably motivating.
That's a little extreme. I don't know.
So,
man, that's just bleak.
Yeah, exactly. But so now you are where you are, and you're creating these. Like you said, you've created portraits for some of the greatest golf clubs in the country. And so coming up here in 2023 with the PGA Championship, you have a big piece in play, right? So tell me a little bit about that and what that project's all about.
I mean, last year and this year are milestone years in terms of the majors. But anyway, to answer your question, coming up at Oak Hill, couldn't be more excited. Actually, I was able to create the artwork for the poster this year without having to visit. So I've not seen Andrew Green's handiwork in person. I've watched the fried egg videos and all the stuff you can find online, and it looks just awesome. I can't wait to see it. As I mentioned, I went to school in Syracuse, which is just basically right down the thruway from Rochester. So it's going to be kind of fun to be back upstate New York. And then for me personally, my first PGA Championship poster was 2013 at Oak Hill in Rochester. So it's really, really cool. I'm excited for this one.
Sorry to cut you off. When you say poster, so is it it's literally like the logo for 2023 PGA Championship that everyone sees and is put everywhere. Like you're creating that poster. Is that what that means?
Well, we do logo design and posters. So the logo design side of our business, we do logo development, brand development for private clubs. So I design, my fantastic team and I design logos and branding for for clubs all around the country. And we also work on every championship logo that comes out from the USGA. So we've been working as the designers of the US Open logo since 2004 at Shinnecock. We have designed a couple of PGA Championship logos over the years, but in this case, we are not doing that work. What I'm there to do is essentially I'll be signing and selling posters in the merchandise tent for a few days. I've got an appearance at one of the local pubs for a raffle and an auction on Thursday night, and then I'm going to be doing a little painting on the golf course sort of mainly for social media, but you know, I'll paint a little painting, a little watercolor out there on the golf course, like I did at the Open at St. Andrews last summer.
Very cool. I think I saw some of those videos. So that's awesome. And so kind of talking about your creative process a little bit. So how do these portraits come about, and how does the creative process kind of kick off for you and your team, which I also want to hear more about your team and how you expanded from kind of being solo dolo. But first question, I guess, is how does your creative process kick off? Because are you, like you said, are you at the actual course, like looking at things, sketching things as you're watching things happen? But how does that work for you?
Well, it depends on the project. I mean, artistically speaking, or art-wise, we offer, or I sort of do two main things: private commissions for golf clubs, and then these major championship and other types of event posters. I think the posters are sort of what get the most eyes, just because, you know, I work for the biggest events in the sport, so a lot more people see those than see sort of the club portraits I do. So to focus on, for example, the U.S. Open poster this year, I go to the venue 9 months to a year in advance. In the case of LACC, I had created artwork for the Walker Cup at LACC back in 2017, and that was an amazing experience all by itself. That was my first introduction to the club, and it sounds like you're kind of new to golf, meaning I think I've heard that you've taken it up over the last few years. And I can remember that, and I can remember being bitten by the bug and jumping in with both feet and learning as much as you can about every aspect of the game, from which clubs were first to, you know, what the latest clubs are. But, you know, you quickly ascertain that there's this mystique element in golf, and there's a lot of clubs around the world that have somehow or another, whether it's a great logo or a great architect, or both in the case of LACC or Marion or something like that. But there's these places that you just hear about, and you know, and I'd never gotten to LACC until I was there to do field work for the artwork for the Walker Cup, and it completely blew my mind. I mean, I had never seen an inland course like this at all, and it like vaulted to my top three right away. And going back again to do the work for this year's U.S. Open, I was only sort of reaffirmed my impressions. It's just such a unique experience. The topography is amazing. The routing and the golf design and architecture on that topography is amazing. You have like Lionel Richie's house on one hole. You've got the Playboy Mansion on another hole, and then, you know, this amazing clubhouse with skyscrapers behind it, and you're in downtown LA. I mean, it's just this amazing juxtaposition of disparate but beautiful elements. So anyways, sorry, the creative process, this was sort of an extreme because not every place knocks your socks off, you know. Some places you got to look a little harder to find, you know, the really neat little, you know, the good views, or the views that no one's seen a million times already. But here was this dramatic, like visually incredibly dramatic golf course that really no one had seen before. So I could kind of do whatever we wanted. So the creative process generally works with me getting to know the place as much as possible. I'll spend a day or two with a sketchbook and a camera, a golf cart and a ladder, and I'll just sort of meander all over the property, and specifically in the mornings and the afternoon evenings when the light is better, and I'll just sort of look at everything that seems interesting and really try and get to know it. Usually by halfway through the first day, I've got my feelings about what direction I want to go, but I kind of feel like due diligence is a big part of my approach, and I really do like to look at everything, because a lot of what I do, I mean, when you go to a place like Erin Hills, or, you know, that no one's ever seen, you know, you can show anything that looks dramatic. But if you're going to Oakmont or Pinehurst and places that people, or Pebble, for example, places people know very well, then the job becomes a little tougher to find something really original. A lot of times I feel like my work is finding new ways to tell a familiar story, or it's almost like, you know, like if you go to Oakmont, it's hard not to do something with the church pews or the clubhouse, you know, because that's what moves the needle with the the layman at large, the general golf population, right? So then you kind of feel like you're a jazz singer and you're just sort of doing your version of an old standard in a way, So I feel like Oakmont was a great example of that. When I went there for 2016, it was pretty fresh off of that massive tree removal project. So, the two things I just mentioned, suddenly there was a view of the church pews and the clubhouse in the distance that hadn't been there for 70 years, so that's what you do.
Yep. Awesome. And so you mentioned all these beautiful clubs, right? And you're right. I am new to golf the last few years, and I haven't visited some of these places, but I got the bug and the itch, and I'm trying to explore as much as I possibly can. But you mentioned your top 3, so I'd love to hear your top 3 clubs that you've worked at and have painted.
I mean, it's really, like everyone says, impossible to pick. But for me, like if I were to pick top 3 U.S., I would say, oh man, I would probably L.A., Marion, and Fisher's Island would probably be my current top 3. I mean, it's hard to squeeze Pine Valley out of that top 3 because it's got all that. It's got, the amazing mystique, the amazing golf course. You're in another world when you step on the property over there. But if you got to leave one out, I mean, one of the 3 has to be near water because, to tell you the truth, like golf near the water is real golf, Like that's where it makes the most sense. That's where it appeals to me the most. It's often the most beautiful. So that's where it started. So I always feel like, golf by water is hard to beat. So you got to have a little bit of water in your top 3. But Marion, I was born right next door. I'm a big history fan. I love the winters at Marion, and I love the tradition at Marion of hosting championship golf. I really feel like contrasting that with LACC, for example. I mean, no one's seen it. LACC, everyone knows it's been a great golf course for 100 and some years, but they haven't hosted anything because they're a members club, and that's the choice that they make, and more power to them. But then there are also these great clubs like Oakmont and Marion and Shinnecock where the members decide that it's important to sort of give back to the game and to let the world in and to share their course with with the greatest players and the greatest fans in the world. And I think Marion's a really great example of a course that's really just, at every decade, it's had amazing champions and championships.
You can really hear your passion for what you do in your answers in golf and the sport in general. And I feel like a lot of times when golf fans talk about golf, they put Augusta National down in Georgia as the holy grail, right? So have you worked there? Have you worked at Augusta?
Well, regrettably, I'm not at liberty to discuss any of that.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Cause I'm just curious how that stacks up across like your top 3 and how that would fit in, but you can do
a quick internet search, would inform, or would give you the answer to that question, but, I'm not able to talk about it.
Got it. No worries. So is there any courses out there that you haven't worked on that you're dreaming, like the holy grail that you want to hit?
Cypress Point. Easy peasy.
Where is that?
Cypress Point.
Yeah.
In Monterey.
Where is it?
Where is it? I'm sorry. It's in Monterey. It's just around the corner from Pebble Beach, literally. It's just around the point. It's the Pine Valley of the West. Alistair McKenzie golf course on the cliffs and beaches and dunes of, well, not cliffs, in the dunes of the Monterey Peninsula. It's I've been on the property and toured it. It's spectacularly beautiful. McKenzie, hard to like. I'm a big fan of different architects. I don't know how far you've gone down that golf geek path yet, but. It's big now. I mean, it's great. Social media is really sort of thrown gas on the fire with that conversation. Like back in the 90s, like you had to be a lot more of a geek to know who A.W. Tillinghast or Donald Ross was. But nowadays they're like in the mainstream vocabulary, which is great. But I'm a big fan of a lot of the different architects. But I would agree with the general consensus that Mackenzie had sort of that unique ability to blend his artistry with the landscape in this sort of just beautiful and seamless manner. A lot of the other Golden Age architects, even when they worked with the land in a very, how would you say, like deep and cooperative way, their green complexes and things would have like Seth Rayner, for example, they look extremely contrived, like they look artificial. There's no effort to sort of make them look natural, and I think that that's the beauty of those types of features, is that they just have so much personality. I mean, there's nothing like some of the great bunkers and great green complexes of like Tillinghast or Thomas or Ross, but Mackenzie just definitely sort of massaged his courses into the land really artfully, and I think that shows beautifully at Cypress Point. And I've not even played it yet. It's hopefully one of their members will be listening to this, and we'll drop you a line.
We'll get the message out there. So speaking of playing a little bit, I mean, being at all these courses, I hope you get to get on them at some points. But how is your golf game? Are you a great golfer, being around the game for so long and being so into it?
No, man, I wish. I'm about where you are. I'm like hovering around 11 or 12 right now. It's I started late in life in some respects, and so I have a few young kids that kind of keep me off the course a little bit. Running your own business is certainly, you can say a lot of good things about it, but you generally feel like you're always on the clock. And there's like the other old cliche, like if you love golf, don't get in the golf business. I'm going to be probably the busiest I am all year in the next few months. So here we are, like with me dying to go play after a long snowy winter. And I've played twice this year so far, and I won't be squeezing in too many rounds until after the U.S. Open probably. So I love it, though, to answer your question with more positivity. I love to play. I love to practice. Like you, I took it up like kind of as an adult. Work brought me to golf, so I took it up as a single guy in my 20s, and I practiced like crazy. I mean, I just played as much as I could at that time. So I'm always a little jealous of the guys or the people that learned when they were young, because I feel like they can always go out there and find a swing. Whereas, if I don't play for 6 months, I could only basically hit it sideways.
You got to restart from scratch. And that makes, So like, I feel like everyone's answer to is like, oh, like, do you play a lot of golf? They're like, their answer is always going to be not enough. No matter how much you play, the answer to that question is I don't play enough golf. So yeah, I'm fully addicted. I have the bug, and I'm in my mid-20s now, and I do always feel like I need to be on the clock working, growing the sports media business, but I am also trying to get on the course as much as possible.
Well,
so hopefully we can continue.
Good.
So for you though, are you looking to ever do products outside of golf, or is that your niche, that's your lane, or do you have products that you aspire to do that are outside of the world of golf?
Yeah, I mean, I always have sort of wish list jobs, I call it. We do a little bit of work outside of golf, and kind of always have whenever it's come up. I mean, I've done artwork for the largest collegiate crew regatta in the country, the Dad Vale in Philadelphia. I've done artwork for the NBA All-Star Game. The last 3 years, I've created the official poster for the Rolex Monte Carlo Masters tennis tournament in Monaco. Wow. And for the last 5 or 6 years now, I create the art for the spring and fall races at Keeneland in Lexington, Kentucky, thoroughbred horse racing. So we like to sort of do things where, I don't know, what would you say? The genre suits my style, or my style suits the genre. Certain things like the NBA All-Star Game was really fun, but I didn't feel like, my look and the NBA were like a natural fit necessarily. I think I would crush it with baseball, for example, which has sort of more of a, I don't know what you'd call it. It's more of a focus on tradition and legacy and history and things like that. I feel like, the NBA and the NFL is much more urban, contemporary, forward-looking, different aesthetic, different culture to it, But like horse racing, it was a perfect thing. I feel like tennis. So in the world of tennis, I mean, I played tennis as a young person, and I love the game, and Wimbledon and the U.S. Open would be, my first two answers for wish list jobs that I'd like to do. That, we've had chats about both, and with any luck, stars will align. But probably my biggest wish list project would be something really different, which would be to create the official poster for the New Orleans Jazz Festival or the Newport Folk Festival or one of these big old music festivals. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, those are awesome goals, and I feel like you could accomplish them. And so you talk about your team a little bit. So I know I asked this question a little bit, but so tell me about that. How has that transition been? How big are you guys now, and kind of what are the different roles and different portions of the company right now?
Well, we're still, obviously a small boutique organization here. So we are 5 to 6 people with me. Which, doesn't sound like a lot, but for a couple of years, 20 years ago, the business was just me. So it's expanded and contracted over the years, but it's currently head and shoulders in the best iteration of our business that we've ever seen, and kind of feels like we're riding a rocket right now. We're as busy as we can be, and great jobs keep coming in, and I've been able to slowly learn to say no to some of sort of the middling jobs, if I can't fit them in. But if a great job comes in, it's, I don't care how busy you are, you sort of find 5 more hours in the day somehow. So there's a lot of great stuff going on, and what's been sort of what's helped us to sort of take on more work is both our design and create, every aspect of our team, but me having to do less of everything else, first of all, because I'm generally a bottleneck in anything that we do. I mean, anything that doesn't go through me gets done a lot more quickly. So the more we can sort of have other people handle with autonomy, the better. So we've worked really hard over the last several years on the creative side to, I want to say train, but really I have a very clear look to my work. There's colors and paints that I work with. There's sort of inspirations that are consistent in all of my work. So influences. So basically, everyone on the creative team has sort of absorbed that very, very thoroughly now. And Inga, our senior designer, has been with the company the longest, and she'll finish some of the paintings literally in terms of once I have most like 90, she'll help with some of the preliminary blocking in, and then some of the very, very final like type and border and detail work. And then we have another designer, Christina, who helps with virtually every single logo that we work on. Spend some time on Christina's desk and in her hands, and then she's doing more and more of execution on some of the art products as well. My wife Jamie joined the business formally in 2015, and she's had just a remarkable impact on business in terms of, well, she won't like me saying it, but she was a Hall of Fame point guard. So she's basically someone who, without knowing anything about art or golf, had an immediate impact on the business and made everything happen more efficiently, more quickly, cut out redundancies. And then she figured out, she now, in addition to sort of handling our business operations, she also really spearheads our e-commerce platform, which has become a real leg of the chair, 10 years ago, our website, we sold a few posters now and then, but, it was nothing too compelling. It was sort of a little bit of extra icing on the cake. But now it's really grown into, it's a very, very important and meaningful segment in our business. And social media, online presence, online advertising, and e-commerce all fall under her umbrella. And then we have some guys who basically, it's not exactly a warehouse, but a lot of our art product and posters and prints they physically exist. So we've got a small warehouse space with stacks of different posters from different events over the last 20 years. I mean, drawers and drawers full of original artwork that will be in some museum someday, I hope. Yeah, that's the team. That's about it. Occasionally we have 2 dogs or more in the studio, but right now it's just our little golden doodle Rosie here today.
Sounds like a lean and mean team, and being busy is a great thing. And when you get to that point in your business that you can say no to projects, I think that's a great thing. So
yeah,
it's cool to hear that. And I guess congrats on the success, Lee. One final question before diving into some rapid fire. You talk about how you have more of a sense of a traditional take on your pieces, right? So I guess my question is, do you have some certain message that you like to try to convey in your artwork that's consistent across all of your work, or is it kind of every piece is different? You never know what is going to turn out, but is there that one specific message that you try to convey in all your artwork?
I mean, I'm tempted to say that, I try and find the star of the show in the subject. Like, I didn't really get very far in talking about my creative process, but like, for example, going back to LACC and the US Open poster, when I first visit a site, I try and find out what I think are the 2 or 3 key aspects or attributes of the venue. In the case of Chambers Bay, there were more than 3. I think that you had Chambers Bay, you had amazing dramatic bunkering. You had the Puget Sound. It's right, like you had, the golf course is right on the water, so you couldn't not show the water. The Olympic Mountains in the distance, which are like snow covered in May and June, you could see those in the distance. And then you had the train, so essentially what I try and do is I try and identify the 2 or 3 key elements that I think tell the story. And then I find a view, or maybe manufacture a view, but typically not, because golf is fairly literal audience. You know what I mean? Like, no one wants to see things that obviously aren't accurate. You know what I mean? Like, if it's the 12th at Augusta, it better look like the 12th at Augusta, like no one wants to see fantasy, really. So anyways, if I take a little bit of artistic license now and then, it's usually in subtle ways to just subtly improve the picture. It's not to make something up out of whole cloth, So I try and identify the 2 or 3 things. I always put it in the same metaphor. There's a star, and then there's 1 or 2 supporting actors. And that's what I try and identify, and that's what I try and showcase in my work. So if you were to say what is consistent in my approach throughout the paintings, I would say that approach remains. Even if I'm doing a more detailed landscape, I kind of strip out the inessential stuff and really celebrate the essential stuff. And what that does, I think, is give my work sort of a iconic, idyllic feel. Like, I try and create pictures that make you wish that you were there, or that kind of a thing, or feel like you are there almost, Generally, I'm not painting golf courses in Open Championship, gale force winds and sideways rain. I'm painting the scene to pull you in and to celebrate the client. I mean, if there's any other messaging, it's my client's messaging, which is, I try and make sure that the Open poster doesn't look like the PGA poster, doesn't look like the US Open poster. I mean, these are all epic events with, incredible histories, all their own. And I really try and do a proper service and justice to, the subject that's at hand.
Yeah, you're making me jealous or feel bad that I don't have anything on my walls, but it would be dangerous because the way you're describing this artwork, I'm going to be looking at this stuff and I'll be like, I need to be on that course right at this second.
Well, I'll send you last year's US Open poster. We'll get a Brookline picture behind you.
You were at Brookline? Yeah.
Yeah, I was there for the whole ride. It was spectacular. Boston turned out,
That's
man.
awesome.
I mean, we all know Boston's reputation as a sports town, but boy, oh boy, I got to say, it felt like I signed posters for. I mean, not everyone gets their poster signed, but a lot of people do. And every one of those people is usually a short little chat. And I got to say, 9 out of 10 customers were from within 10 miles of Brookline. I mean, Boston
Yeah.
was everywhere. It was wild.
Yep. Yeah, Boston sports fans, they show out. They show out. Well, no, it's been fantastic talking with you. And again, I love hearing the passion for what you do and all your answers, and it's cool to see. So some rapid fire here. You can go one word, one phrase, take as long as you want, but we'll dive right in. Who's your favorite athlete growing up as a kid?
Dr. J.
Dr. J. Who's your favorite athlete in current day sports?
Huh. Um, that's a tough one there. I'm gotta admit, I'm kind of a
Who's your
fair
favorite?
weather sports fan, you know. So my tendency is going to be. I mean,
Fair enough.
I pay attention to most sports during the playoffs. You know, my Philly tribalism comes out. Joel Embiid, I'm so glad he got the MVP this year. He's definitely my guy. Like I love how he has like been. He's just been a great leader for the Sixers. So I'm a huge fan of him. And then I got to give a golf answer too, because I think about it a lot because I love rooting for different golfers, but I kind of recently realized that Spieth might have evolved into my favorite just because he's such a roller coaster ride. And the one thing that everyone
Yes.
loves about Tiger, I feel like, I mean, aside from just the endless winning, I mean, everybody loves that,
Yeah.
but he had that Jordan-esque flair for the dramatic. Like when he needed to make like this ridiculous flop shot, not only would he make it, but he'd hole it, you know? And I feel like Spieth is kind of the only guy out there who really consistently makes miracle shots, and lots of times when it counts. So I love that. So he's definitely one of my faves for that reason.
I'm a huge Spieth guy as well, and I'll take those answers. But Joel Embiid, I respect him as a player and athlete, but he is destroying my Celtics right now. So,
Oh man, I totally forgot. It's a good thing we didn't talk about that at the beginning. This conversation
yeah,
wouldn't have gone so well.
this podcast is going to come out after the fact, but the Celtics and Sixers are currently in a playoff series, and the Sixers are up 3-2. So I'm scared. So we'll see
Won
what
the
happens.
last two. Don't
Yeah.
got to tell the whole story, Danny. After being down 2-1.
Yes, this is correct. This is correct. So I'm going to make you give another golf answer here. So
Sure.
who is your dream foursome? So you get to pick 3 other players. They don't have to be professional golfers. They could be anyone. They could be family members, celebrities, whomever. But who is your dream foursome to play golf with?
So I gotta confess that I anticipated this question because I listened to your interview with Will Zalatoris, and because I'm bad, I'm like his coach. I don't usually have off the cuff answers, so I thought about it. But Trevino, first of
There
all,
you go.
I mean, dude, I love watching the old videos of him in his heyday winning the Open and the U.S. Open. And there is literally nobody like that on the planet right now who goes out and like plays clutch golf in between wisecracks to the crowd. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. And then my contemporary selections would be Jason Bateman and Will Arnett from Smartless. You know that show and those guys?
Good.
I listen to
I
that
know
show
those
a
guys. I actually
ton.
don't know the show.
Oh, check it out.
No,
It's like
I don't
a
know the show.
hugely
I will.
popular podcast with all these amazing guests, but the guests aren't the thing. It's almost like the banter between these 3 guys is kind of the whole shtick. But Bateman and Arnett are golf fanatics. I think they're Bel Air members, and they're always talking about golf, and they keep me cracking up while I paint. So I would love to get out there with them.
I will definitely check out the podcast. Always looking to check out other shows and how they're approaching
Yeah.
the space. So I will.
It's all
definitely do that.
entertainment space, you know.
Yeah, it's all the same. So, few more. Who is your favorite music artist?
I'm so old, but Bob Dylan. Gotta say, the Beatles when I was a kid. My holy trinity was Dylan, Neil Young, and Tom Waits. But But I mean, if I don't know what the hell to put on when I come in like the studio on a Saturday morning and I don't want to be here, I'll put on some Dylan just to ease on into it. It's kind of always my go-to.
Are you usually do your work with other sounds on the background? You said you listen to podcasts, music, or is it like you do your best work when it's kind of silent?
I mean, I do work in silence sometimes just for variety, but no, I mean, it's one thing you never realize. Like no one tells you, you know, if you're going to be an artist or an illustrator or something like this, that, you know, it's a lot of solitary time. It's a lot of time between your own ears. And I'm fairly introverted and introspective in general, so it gets to be a little bit excessive. So, I mean, there's times where I get in quietly in the zone, and I like that. But it's usually a question of whether I'm going to have what am I going to have on in the background, whether it's going to be some talk stuff, music. I mean, I used to have movies on in the background. In fact, I mean, I find that Westerns are really good movies to have on because you don't really have to watch a Western to know what's happening. You can just listen to it. Whereas other types of shows, you know, you end up looking all the time and then you're not painting. And so books on tape. I listen to a lot of books on tape. Yeah.
Fair.
Less silence anymore.
That's good. Favorite artist. So like who is your idol, I guess, in the space growing up, or maybe it's someone new today?
I mean, I've got such an eclectic mix because that's what I was into. But my original reason for drawing was comic books. So some of my heroes were like the artist that invented Spider-Man, Steve Ditko, or, you know, Jack Kirby, the artist that like drew Captain America for the 60s and the 70s, you know, the whole Marvel universe. So this is kind of a funny aside that I'll try and keep brief. But again, something nobody knows is that although I've been called Lee by my parents from the day I was born, my birth name is Stanley Wybranksi, and I'm named after my father. And my father hated the name. So he didn't want to call me that, but my mom insisted, so they decided they'll call me Lee, right? But anyways, as a kid, my name was Stan Lee, and Stan Lee was the founder and publisher of Marvel Comics, who invented all of these characters. And in fact, he used to have cameos in all the Marvel movies until he passed away recently. Anyways, sorry, long-winded digression there, but comic book artists in the beginning, art school-wise, I think if there's one fine artist that influences my work the most, it's Edward Hopper, who is famous. His most famous painting is probably Nighthawks at the Diner. He also did a very, very famous painting of a lighthouse on Cape Cod, but one of the great American painters, mid-century. Most of the artists and influences that find their way into my work now are probably like early to mid 20th century influences, whether it's the great travel posters from the 20s or the national park posters from the 30s, the famous British Railway posters also from the 20s and the 30s. Like there's something about that time that really tickles my fancy, I guess. I mean, I have a lot of other things that I like, but, you know, I like abstract art, but I'm not an abstract painter. I mean, it's like trying to speak a different language to me. You know, I might love Picasso, but you're not going to find Picasso in my golf posters.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. That's a great answer. And so 2 more here. What is your biggest fear? It's always a tricky one.
And I'll never break 80 again.
I still haven't broke 80, so
I've only done it a couple of times, and it's been a lot of years. It's sad.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good fear to have. I like that one. That's a new one I've gotten. Last one. What is one word that best describes you?
Neurotic. No, I take that back. I mean, I am neurotic, but that's not the number one word. I would say creative. Creative.
That's literally what I was gonna say. Throughout this interview, I was like, I think he's gonna say creative because it's true.
That's
I
great.
can see it. So That's a great answer.
Well, I hate to be predictable,
Awesome.
but
No, not predictable at all. This has been one of my most fascinating, unique conversations I've had on the podcast, so I appreciate it. And at the end of every Pass the Torch podcast we all wrap all the lessons and themes we talked about kind of in one final question. So the final question here is, if you could take one lesson that you've learned throughout your journey and your career that you could pass along to the next generation, what would that one lesson be to help them accomplish their dreams?
I guess it's just stay in the game. There's a tendency, especially when you're young and growing up, like, I've got kids now, and there's a tendency to think that things are always going to be the way they are. And the things that are oppressing you or that you're struggling with at this point are always going to be there, and they're always going to be oppressing you. And what you don't know when you're young is the land changes beneath your feet. Circumstances shift and evolve. And sometimes, like, I think I stole that from that Ali movie, When We Were Kings, and Rope-a-Dope. But sometimes, your only job is to go in there and keep on your feet, keep the car on the road, and that's it. And, you got to work hard, and it helps to have a vision, and it helps to have goals. But as someone who sort of took a meandering path to where I am now, there were many moments where I really questioned whether I was am I following my dreams, or am I wasting my time, And that's why I told you, to me personally, a lot of people told me that they liked my work. So that made me feel like I was doing something right. And it took me, I must not be the sharpest tool in the shed, because people liked my work for 15 years and I could barely make a living, But anyways, sometimes you just got to stay in the game and let the game come to you, and don't expect to have all the answers every damn day,
Right. Whoever can stay on the treadmill the longest will succeed. And so it's just take every day, day by day, step by step, and one foot after the other, and you'll get there. So that's a great message, Lee. It's been awesome talking to you. I'm excited to dive into more of your work and maybe have it hanging up on my walls here shortly.
Get something up there, man. That ball hurts my eyes.
It hurts me too. It hurts me. And I'm excited to see the PGA Championship piece coming up. That should be an awesome project from you and the team. So yeah, we'll stay in touch, and looking forward to your future and your work.
Thank you, Danny. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for having me.
Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoyed the content. There's plenty more Pass the Torch episodes, along with other podcasts we got going on and video series we do. So subscribe, and we'll see you later.